Officer and her injured K9 ambushed in a whiteout. Then a Navy SEAL breaks orders and charges in the whiteout came without warning, swallowing the Wyoming highway in a curtain of spinning ice. Deputy Claire Maddox kept both hands locked on the steering wheel of the patrol SUV, her breath tight in her chest as the wind slammed across Elk Divide. Snow hammered the windshield so violently it looked like the sky itself was breaking apart. Valor shifted in the back seat, claws scraping the rubber mat, his low rumble vibrating through the frame of the vehicle. "Easy, boy," Claire whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was speaking to him or herself. Valor wasn't just a K9, he was her partner, 6 years of discipline and fierce devotion wrapped in a sable and black coat. Even in the chaos, his gaze stayed fixed on the blur of white beyond the glass, as if he sensed the danger before she did. The radio cracked once, then died. She reached for the mic. "Dispatch, this is Unit 3, Visibility 0, requesting." A blast split the passenger window before she could finish. The glass atomized inward. A roar of automatic gunfire shredded the side of the SUV. Valor barked sharply, a deep, warning sound that snapped Claire's instincts awake. Ambush! Another burst tore into the rear quarter panel, metal shrieking as the vehicle fishtailed. Claire slammed the brakes, fighting the skid. Bullets chewed through the snow around them, strobes of muzzle flash flickering through the blizzard like fireflies in hell. "Hold on!" Claire hissed. The next impact hit the front tire. The SUV spun. Snow exploded around them. The world flipped. Once, twice. The roof caved, windows bursting in a spray of ice crystals. Valor's yelp cut through the chaos, raw and panicked. Then silence. The SUV came to rest on its side, half buried in a drift. Claire tasted blood. She fought the seatbelt, breath ragged, ears ringing. Every nerve screamed. Her ribs felt cracked. Her right leg was pinned. She blinked through the haze. Valor. He was wedged against the cage divider, chest rising in short, shallow movements. His flank was darkened with blood. But when he saw her stir, he lifted his head an inch, eyes burning with a mix of pain and defiance. "I'm right here," she choked out. Gunfire still echoed faintly in the storm, fading as the attackers disappeared back into the veil of white. They hadn't stayed to confirm the kill. They didn't need to. The storm would finish what they started. Claire fumbled for the radio. The device was dangling from exposed wires, half crushed. She pressed the transmit button anyway. Unit 3 to any unit. Officer down, ambush, Elk Divide, please, help. Static swallowed her voice. A final spark flickered across the dying screen. Her fingers slipped. Her vision narrowed. Valor gave a soft, broken sound, pushing his muzzle against the bars as if trying to reach her. "Stay awake," she whispered. "Stay with me, buddy." But the darkness surged up and took her before she could say more. Far above the ridge, 4 miles of wind-scoured forest away, Lieutenant Logan Hale lay prone inside a snow-covered observation blind. His breath was slow, controlled, fog curling from between his teeth. The storm made the world look like a broken TV screen, but he was used to this kind of solitude. The Navy had carved it into him. He watched the faint infrared signatures of mule deer through the scope, monitoring the old trafficking corridor he'd been ordered to observe. Nothing more. No interference, no heroics. Hold your post. The kind of order that looked good on paper and weighed like iron in the chest. Logan adjusted the rifle sight, checked the feed on his encrypted tablet, and listened to the steady roar of wind. Then something bright split the sky. A single bloom of orange tore upward in the blizzard, violent, unnatural, unmistakably an explosion. Logan sat up fast. His heartbeat thudded against his ribs. He raised the scope again. Through the swirling white he glimpsed it. A patrol SUV at the base of the ridge, flames kicking through the shattered frame. What the hell? He pressed 2 fingers to the comms device clipped to his vest. Hale to command. Do you copy? Possible vehicle detonation at Elk Divide. Investigating. Only static answered. The storm was killing every frequency. He tried a second channel. Nothing. The wind moaned low across the ridge, a sound that made the hair at the back of his neck rise. Then his secondary receiver, old, battered, nearly obsolete, made a sharp, sickening pop. A voice bled through. This is Deputy. Maddox. Officer down. Ambushed. K9 hit. Please. The transmission dissolved into white noise. Logan stayed frozen for a beat, fingers tightening slowly around the radio. His breath clouded in front of him. Every instinct, every drilled protocol, every line of duty told him to stay put. Hold position. Do not break cover. But another part of him, the part that remembered sandstorms and smoke and the sound of a teammate bleeding out while backup was on the way, moved first. Never again. He slung his rifle, grabbed the trauma kit, and powered up the locator. The storm scrambled the signal, but the fire below was clear enough. He descended the slope at a dead run. The wind clawed at him. Snow burned against his face. His boots sank deep, every step a fight. But he didn't slow. If someone was still alive down there, they didn't have long. Logan slid the final stretch of the hill, boots carving through icy powder. The heat hit him immediately. Flames licked through the twisted SUV. Smoke curled upward, burned black against the blizzard white. He shielded his face and shouted, "Sheriff's Department! Can you hear me?" A faint sound answered from inside. A dog's muffled whine. Logan forced the passenger door. It was jammed. He braced one foot against the snowbank and wrenched hard until the metal screamed open. Valor pushed weakly toward him, eyes sharp even through pain. "Easy, big guy," Logan whispered. He cut the harness, slid an arm under Valor's chest, and lifted him out. The dog sagged but didn't cry. Not once. Logan laid him gently on the snow, then crawled deeper. He found Claire half buried under the collapsed dash. Pulse weak. Skin cold, but alive. "Hang on," he murmured. "I've got you." Another crack sounded through the storm. A distant engine. Tires grinding on ice. Logan's eyes snapped up. Whoever hit them might be circling back. He gathered Claire in his arms, Valor pressed against his leg, and pulled both into the cover of fallen pines. The blizzard swallowed them, and for the first time that night, Logan Hale felt the storm wasn't the only thing hunting them. The storm closed around them like a living thing, swallowing the last flicker of flame from the wreck behind them. Logan pushed deeper into the trees, Claire limp in his arms, Valor limping close against his side, every breath from the dog a ragged rasp. Snow clung to their faces and gear, freezing the small beads of blood that dotted the churned ground they left behind. Halfway up the ridge, Logan's radio crackled to life. A thin thread of command bled through the static. "Hale, status report. Hold your position. Do not intervene." It was the same order he had received hours earlier, the same cold line the military drew to keep operations clean and uncomplicated. But now it echoed against the memory he'd been trying to bury for years. Helmand Province, a sandstorm, a teammate trapped and bleeding behind a collapsed wall. Logan begging for clearance to break formation. Command saying, "Stand by," the storm drowning the last 10 seconds of his friend's life. Never again. He looked down at Claire, her cheeks streaked with soot and frost, her breath weak and shallow. Valor pressed his head into Logan's thigh as if urging him forward, nudging him with a strength he barely had left. The radio crackled again. "Hale, do you copy?" Logan switched it off. Not gently, not with hesitation, just a firm, final motion that felt like tearing open an old scar. He made his own path up the ridge. By the time he reached a cluster of boulders partially shielding them from the wind, Claire's lips had turned almost blue. Logan knelt and lowered her onto the snow, immediately shrugging off his jacket to cover her torso. Valor circled once, trembling, before collapsing against her side, burying his nose into her shoulder, protecting her the only way he still could. The dog's loyalty pulled something tight in Logan's chest. Canines didn't fear death, they feared losing their person, and Valor wasn't letting her go. Logan leaned close, checking Claire's pulse again. Faint but present. He opened the emergency heating pack, cracked the inner core, and tucked it beneath her jacket. His fingers brushed the badge clipped to her vest. Deputy Claire Maddox, 28. He didn't know more than that, but he knew enough. She'd stayed in that vehicle until she was sure Valor was alive. Most officers would have unbuckled first. Claire had reached backward. That mattered. Another gust slammed across the ridge. The boulders shuddered. Snow sheeted sideways, thickening into a wall so dense it felt like cloth pressing against the world. Claire stirred. A soft sound, little more than a breath leaking past cracked lips. Logan leaned closer, one hand bracing the side of her face, the other checking the wound along her hairline. "Claire, you're all right. Stay with me." Her lashes fluttered. The world swam back into her eyes in fragments. Cold, darkness, a vague silhouette above her. Then something warm and familiar pressed into her ribs. Valor. She sucked in a broken gasp. Her hand slid blindly towards the dog, fingers tangling into his fur. He shifted closer, resting his head on her chest. His breathing was uneven. His body trembled with each exhale. But his eyes were locked on her, refusing to close. Logan saw the moment recognition hit her. Fear. Then the memory of what had happened. The ambush. The gunfire. The fall. She tried to sit up. "No. Don't move," Logan said, pressing a steady palm to her shoulder. "You took a hit to the head. Your leg is pinned from the crash. You try to stand and you'll pass out again." She blinked up at him, disoriented. "Who are—" "Logan Hale, Navy. We'll talk later. Right now, you need to breathe." She swallowed hard. Her gaze dragged past him toward the swirling white of the forest. "They came out of nowhere," she rasped. "No warning, no headlights." Logan nodded. "I know. And whoever hit you expected the storm to bury the rest." A flicker of panic crossed Claire's face. "Valor, is he alive?" Logan said, "but hurt. He needs real treatment soon." As if hearing the words, Valor struggled to lift his head. His breathing hitched. Blood darkened the snow beneath him. Logan tightened the bandage he'd wrapped around the dog's flank, but the pressure made Valor flinch. Claire reached for him again, ignoring the pain that rippled through her ribs. Her fingers brushed the top of his head, and the dog exhaled a low, fragile sigh. "Good boy," she whispered. "You held on." Logan felt the weight of that moment settle into the cold. Some bonds didn't need words. Valor wasn't following instinct. He wasn't following training. He was staying alive because she needed him to. A sudden crack echoed through the trees. Sharp. Close. Logan's head snapped up. He pulled Claire and Valor deeper into the shadow of the rocks. Another crack. Not gunfire. Something heavier. Mechanical. Claire's eyes widened. "I know that sound." Snowcat treads. For a moment, Logan didn't understand. Then it clicked. Whoever staged the ambush wouldn't risk getting lost in a whiteout. They would use the same machinery as winter search teams. Snowcats. Meaning they were still out here. And closing in. Logan scanned the ridge through the veil of snow. The storm had thinned just enough to reveal movement. Dark shapes. 2. Maybe 3. Crawling slowly across the slope, lights muted by the drifts. Claire's pulse spiked. "They're coming back to finish it." Logan steadied her with a hand on her arm. "Not while I'm breathing." A shape broke off from the others, moving faster, more deliberately. Then another. They weren't wandering blind. They knew exactly where the SUV had crashed, and they knew the storm bought them time. Logan reached for his rifle. Claire grabbed his wrist weakly. "You shouldn't be here. If you're military, you have orders. You need to go." He met her eyes, blue, sharp, filled with the kind of fear that came when someone tried to protect others, even through their own pain. "I had orders once," he said quietly. "I followed them, and someone died. Not again." Before she could respond, Valor pushed himself upright with a sudden, desperate surge, staggering, shaking, but standing. Logan stared. The dog wasn't tracking the figures. He was staring southeast, ears pinned, nose twitching hard. Claire frowned. "What is it, boy?" Valor moved one step forward, then two. He stopped and growled. Logan's breath hitched. He wasn't growling at the ambushers. He was growling at something behind them. Logan spun. A dark silhouette had emerged from the deeper trees, moving fast and low. A man with a rifle, hood drawn tight, snow coating his shoulders. Not part of the group on the ridge. A second ambush. Logan lunged, dragging Claire down just as the first shot cracked through the clearing. Snow burst where her head had been a heartbeat earlier. Valor leapt in front of her, barking so fiercely it echoed off the boulders despite his injuries. Logan raised his rifle, eyes sharp. Claire whispered, shaken, "I didn't know there were two teams." "There weren't," Logan said, "which means someone else wants you dead tonight." Valor's growl deepened, his body trembling with the effort to stay standing. Even wounded, even bleeding, he planted himself between Claire and the new threat, refusing to yield. The storm howled around them, carrying voices and footsteps through the pines. They weren't alone anymore, and whatever was coming next was worse than the men on the ridge. The storm pressed against the ridge with a weight that felt almost human, as if the mountain itself leaned in to listen. Logan kept one knee braced in the snow, rifle raised toward the figure advancing through the whiteout. Wind clawed at his sleeves. Claire gripped Valor's collar with trembling fingers, the dog's body taut despite the injury darkening his flank. The shadow moved closer, careful, deliberate. Logan exhaled slow, letting instinct take over. But before he could fire, the figure suddenly froze. A voice carried faintly through the storm. "Hold your fire. I am not with them." Logan's finger tightened on the trigger. The stranger lifted both hands slowly, stepping into the glow of Logan's headlamp. A man in a faded rescue parka, mid-40s, beard frozen with ice, expression strained. "Name," Logan called. "Garrett Pike. Search and rescue. I heard the explosion. I thought someone might still be alive." His breath fogged sharply in the air. His eyes flicked to Claire, then Valor, then the direction of the retreating snowcats. "That wasn't weather trouble," he muttered. "Those men were hunting you." Claire winced as she tried to sit up, jaw tight with pain. "They're not search crew?" She rasped. "They work for Calder." Garrett stiffened. "Sheriff Calder?" Claire nodded once. The movement sent a tremor through her frame. Her voice shook, not from fear, but from fury held too long. "I found something I wasn't supposed to. Money transfers, routes, videos, a warehouse at Elk Divide Mill being used to move product through empty state land. And Calder was at the center of it." Garrett's face paled. He stepped closer, lowering his voice as if the trees might hear. "I knew something was off in that department. Officers getting reassigned, evidence going missing. But I didn't think it was him." Logan didn't lower his weapon. "Not yet. Why are you here alone?" Garrett swallowed. "Because I reported some of it to Internal Affairs 2 months ago, and someone from Calder's office showed up at my house 3 days later. I've been hiding between outposts ever since." It hit Logan with a cold certainty. A second target. A second witness. Different attackers, same goal. Claire sucked in a breath as Valor pushed his body forward, half limping, half dragging himself to stand between her and the stranger, his back arched, his throat rumbled deep. Garrett lifted both palms again. "Easy, boy. I'm not here to hurt her." Valor didn't budge. Logan stepped in. "If you're telling the truth, help us move. They'll track the crash. They'll sweep this ridge within the hour." Garrett nodded quickly. "There's an old maintenance shack 200 yards east, hidden in the trees. No road leading to it. They won't find you there." Logan didn't thank him. He just moved. He slung Claire over his shoulders in a fireman's carry, careful not to jar her ribs, while Garrett supported Valor's weight on his uninjured side. The dog staggered but didn't fall. Each breath was a pained effort, yet his eyes stayed fixed on Claire, never breaking contact. Halfway to the shack, a sudden gust of wind hit them from the north, violent enough to knock Garrett sideways. Logan planted his boots, steadying the weight across his shoulders. Valor pressed his body against Claire protectively, shielding her from the icy blast. Even half-conscious, Claire felt him lean on her, felt his ribs shudder. She dragged her fingers through his fur. "Stay with me, Valor." The dog let out a weak grumble, answering her like he understood every word. Inside the shack, Logan kicked snow away from the entrance, slammed the door shut, and blocked it with a beam. The space was narrow, lit only by the faint glow of a cracked lantern Garrett found on a shelf. Claire lay on a wool blanket Logan spread across the floor. Valor curled against her instantly, pressing his injured side against her hip, despite the blood staining the fabric. Logan crouched in front of them, stripping off his gloves. "Tell me everything you found. Fast." Claire notched her breath, trying to hold on to consciousness. Her voice broke in pieces, but each word carried weight. Timber roots, fake environmental shipments, Calder rerouting confiscated weapons, using 2 deputies to escort trucks through the state lines. I followed a lead into the old mill last week, saw crates of chemicals and cash, filmed it, hid the footage in a micro SD behind the Kevlar seam in my vest. Logan lifted her vest gently. The hidden seam was still intact. Claire swallowed. "I sent everything to Internal Affairs. Within an hour I got a call from Calder, offering to escort me to verify the scene. I knew something was wrong, but I went anyway. I didn't want this to cost anyone else their life." Valor pressed closer, as if trying to absorb her pain. His breathing picked up, a soft whine slipping past his teeth. Logan watched him, noting every tremor. "You saved that drive," Logan said. "And right now, it might be the only thing keeping this from spreading." Claire shook her head weakly. "You don't understand. Calder isn't working alone. He's moving weapons and drugs through federal wildlife zones. Someone outside the county has to be backing him." A beat of silence. Wind hammered the walls. Logan sensed it, the shift in her voice. A truth she hadn't spoken yet. "Claire," he said quietly. "What else?" She hesitated, eyes flicking towards the door, as if afraid someone might be listening from the storm. "I saw the ledger, and the names in it weren't deputies." Logan leaned in. "Who?" Her throat tightened. "Federal contractors, freight companies with national defense clearances, and one name I shouldn't have seen." Garrett watched her nervously. "Who did you see?" She exhaled with difficulty. "A man tied to a private security firm that used to move military equipment overseas. Someone Calder couldn't touch without help. Someone with power." Logan felt a cold ripple climb his spine. He had heard that name before. The kind whispered during operations that went sideways. A name attached to scandals the public never heard about. Claire's voice dropped to a shaky whisper. "I think the ambush tonight wasn't just to kill me. It was to erase the drive before the storm clears." Logan reached for the vest seam, pulled out the tiny micro SD, wrapped it in a piece of cloth, and tucked it inside his belt pouch. "Not tonight," he said. Outside, something crunched in the snow. Not wind, not trees. Footsteps. Garrett froze. Logan blew out the lantern, plunging the shack into darkness. Valor lifted his head, nose twitching, body suddenly rigid. The growl that followed was deep and guttural, nothing like the pained whimpers from earlier. It was warning. Territory. "Protection!" Logan raised his rifle. The door handle twitched. A breath of cold air seeped through the cracks. Claire reached for Valor, whispering his name. Valor stood, wounded but unyielding, positioning himself between her and the threat, fur bristling even as blood dripped from his bandage. The door creaked, and Valor lunged. The maintenance shack groaned under the weight of the storm, every gust rattling the warped boards like a warning. Snow piled against the doorway, stacking higher each minute, threatening to bury the small refuge completely. Inside, Logan knelt beside Valor with a calm that didn't match the tension coursing through his veins. The lantern flickered. Claire's breathing was steadier, but her eyes drifted open and shut, fighting exhaustion. Valor lay pressed against her, head resting on her chest, ribs rising unevenly. Logan peeled away the soaked bandage and examined the wound again. The bullet hadn't penetrated the lung, but infection and blood loss were real threats. "You're a stubborn one," Logan murmured, running saline over the torn flesh. Valor didn't flinch. His gaze stayed locked on Claire, not Logan, as if she were the only thing anchoring him to consciousness. The dog's instinct wasn't just loyalty. It was survival tied to hers. If she faded, he would too. Garrett paced the back of the shack, rubbing his gloved hands together, eyes darting every time the wind rose. "They will sweep this ridge," he muttered. "If Calder thinks she still has the drive." Logan cut him a look. "She doesn't." "I do." Garrett blinked. "That just paints a bigger target on you, Hale." Logan didn't disagree. He finished cleaning Valor's wound, wrapped it tight, and set a chemical heat pad under the dog's chest. Claire stirred as the warmth spread between them, whispering the dog's name with a cracked voice. Valor lifted his head and pressed his muzzle to her chin, a soft huff of relief leaving his throat. "He saved me twice tonight," Claire murmured. "I don't know how he's still standing." "Because he's yours," Logan said simply. The storm rumbled overhead like distant artillery. Logan rose, crossed the shack, and pulled out his comms kit. The primary channels were dead, but the encrypted military band might still punch through. He switched on the device. Static swallowed the silence. "Come on, give me something." Garrett moved closer. "Can they even hear you in weather like this?" Logan didn't answer. He adjusted the frequency dial in microscopic increments, listening for any break in the storm's chokehold. Then, one sharp tone, a heartbeat of clarity. Logan seized it. "This is Lieutenant Logan Hale. Officer down. K9 injured. Ambush at Elk Divide. I have critical evidence tied to ongoing operations. Request immediate response." Static roared again, then softened. A voice cut through like a razor. "Hale, this is Commander Reeves. Signal's trash, but I read you. Report." Relief flickered across Logan's face, but didn't weaken his voice. "Sir, Deputy Claire Maddox uncovered a trafficking route running through Wyoming. Local sheriffs involved, possibly federal contractors. She has proof. Or did. And the K9?" Reeves asked. "Injured, still responsive. Protecting her." Logan added the last line intentionally. Reeves understood K9s better than most officers. He wouldn't let that detail go ignored. Reeves paused. "Hale, listen carefully. Wyoming is part of a larger network we've been tracking. Colorado, Utah, Montana. Somebody high up is keeping the routes open. If her evidence is legit, this is bigger than Calder." Logan shot Claire a look. She was awake now, listening. "We're 2 hours out," Reeves continued. "Weather's choking our entry, but Bravo team is airborne. Your only job is to keep all 3 of you alive until they land. After that, extraction." Garrett let out a low breath. 2 hours in this storm feels like 2 days. Logan's grip tightened on the radio. "Reeves, we have hostiles on foot and in snowcats. Multiple teams. They know she survived." "Then expect them to come hard," Reeves said. "And Hale, don't break radio silence again unless absolutely necessary. Whoever ordered that ambush might be listening on stolen military channels." Logan closed his eyes briefly. "Copy." The line fizzled out. Claire pushed herself upright with effort. Logan knelt beside her instantly. "Easy. 2 hours," she murmured. "That's assuming the storm gives them a window." Logan didn't deny it. He studied her pupils, checked for worsening concussion. She held his gaze a moment too long, exhaustion fighting clarity. "I need your full story," he said. "Everything before tonight. Anything that ties Calder to the bigger network." Claire wrapped her arms around Vala, grounding herself. She spoke softly, but her words were sharp as broken glass. "I wasn't looking for corruption. I was looking for a missing girl. 14. Vanished on a logging road near the mill. No tracks, no signs of struggle, just a backpack thrown into a drainage ditch." Garrett froze. "I know that case. They shut it down fast." "Because they knew she wasn't missing," Claire whispered. "She was taken." Wind slammed the shack. A plank rattled loose, letting in a strip of freezing air. Claire continued. "I started digging, and the deeper I went, the more I realized that the sheriff's department wasn't ignoring cases. They were filtering them. Anything that tied back to Elk Divide Mill disappeared. Victims weren't random. They were chosen for transport." Garrett swore under his breath. Claire pressed her forehead to Vala's. "I recorded everything I found. The ledger, the crates, the names, the security firm helping move the shipments. But there was something else. Something I didn't understand until I saw them tonight." Logan leaned closer. "What? There were 2 teams," she said quietly. "One hit the SUV. The other stalked us through the trees. They weren't working together. They were competing." Garrett blinked. "Competing for what?" Claire swallowed. "For the drive." Logan felt the realization hit like cold water. Calder wants the evidence gone, but someone else wants it kept buried for a different reason. "A corporation?" Garrett asked. "Or a contractor trying to erase their own involvement?" Logan said. Claire winced as Vala pushed closer, sensing her rising panic. His ears pinned, nose bumping her chin in an instinctive attempt to soothe her. Logan watched the exchange with a quiet respect. The dog wasn't reacting to fear. He was answering it, shielding her emotions the same way he shielded her body. Another gust battered the shack. Snow sifted down from the roof. Garrett stiffened. "They'll find the crash site soon. When they do, they'll sweep outward in a circle." Logan nodded grimly. "Which puts them on a direct line to us." Claire pressed a hand to Vala's flank. He lifted his head, alert again despite the pain. The instinct in his eyes had changed. It wasn't just survival. It was a promise. If someone broke through that door, he'd die standing between her and the threat. Logan rose, grabbed his rifle, and moved to the narrow slit in the wall. The world outside was disappearing, eaten by white. "The storm is getting worse," Garrett said. Logan didn't turn around. "Good. Maybe it slows them down." Garrett shook his head. "Or maybe it hides their tracks until they're right on top of us." The idea settled heavily in the small room. 2 hours, 2 teams, 1 injured deputy, 1 wounded K9, 1 civilian caught in the crossfire, and Logan Hale, who had already broken enough orders to end his career. He tightened his grip on the rifle and looked back at Claire and Valor curled together on the blanket. Reeves was right about one thing. For the next 2 hours, their lives were in his hands, and the storm outside was only getting started. The storm had eased just enough to give the world a ghostly clarity, the kind where everything looked close and far at the same time. Logan led the way through knee-high snow, Claire supported by Garrett on her left, while Valor walked on her right like a wounded but determined sentinel. The dog limped, chest rising fast with each breath, yet every few steps he pushed ahead of Claire, clearing the path as if danger might materialize from the swirling haze. Claire's phone buzzed faintly with intermittent GPS pings. The screen flickered, the battery fighting cold and trauma. Elk Divide Mill was 3/4 of a mile north, concealed in a ravine known for logging accidents and abandoned equipment. Tonight, it hid something far worse. They reached the top of a ridge. Through the remnants of the whiteout, the warehouse appeared. A long, corrugated metal building half buried in snowdrifts, windows blacked out, no lights except a faint amber pulse behind the loading bay. A generator, still running. Logan held up a hand. Claire leaned against a pine, absorbing a shallow wheeze. Valor sat beside her, leaning against her, leg, watching Logan's every move. "You sure this is where you saw it?" Logan asked quietly. Claire nodded, jaw tight. "This is where they sorted the shipments, where the routes converged. Calder brought me here the first night, pretending he wanted my help cataloging seized evidence. But it wasn't evidence. It was inventory." Garrett swallowed. Inventory for who? She didn't answer. She didn't need to. Logan crouched and signaled them forward. They moved to the loading dock, hugging the wall. The mill loomed like the mouth of a buried creature. Logan tested the side door. To his surprise, it cracked open an inch. "Unlocked?" Garrett whispered. "That's never good." Valor stood rigid, hackles raised, nose hunting the air. Then he nudged the door with his snout. Hard, as if urging them in. Logan pushed it open. The smell hit first. Chemical sting. Acetone, ethanol, something metallic beneath. The dark interior hummed with the low rumble of industrial equipment. Logan swept the flashlight in a quick arc. Rows of vats, plastic tubing, containers labeled as wildlife research supplies stacked neatly on pallets. Except half the crates were open. Inside the first one were bricks of crystalline powder wrapped in plastic. Garrett exhaled. "Wildlife research, my ass." Claire stared at the stamp on the crate. The symbol of a federal conservation contractor. She fought to steady her voice. "They're using federal shipments as cover, moving narcotics across borders as animal monitoring gear." Logan examined one of the crates. Military-grade waterproof sealants, reinforced steel hinges. He recognized the pattern. Someone with government access was laundering product under an environmental program. He crossed the floor to another row. Bundles of cash lay half-sorted on a table, rubber bands snapped from the cold. Ledger pages pinned with thumbtacks fluttered lightly in the draft. Claire moved beside him. She winced, but didn't slow. "Look at the routing codes. This isn't just Wyoming. Utah, Idaho, Colorado. They're using the mountain corridor as a pipeline." Logan scanned one sheet. $5 million in movement for January alone. All disguised under wildlife tagging logistics. No wonder Calder's so desperate. He muttered. Valor suddenly moved ahead, nose low, tail stiff. He trotted around a metal shelf and disappeared behind it. Logan tensed. Valor. Hold! But the dog didn't stop. He pushed against a section of wall paneling, sniffed again, then lifted a paw and scraped. Hard. Claire blinked. "He smells something." Logan approached, ran his hand along the wall, then pressed his shoulder against it. The metal budged. It wasn't a wall. It was a false partition. Together, Logan and Garrett slid it aside. Behind it lay a narrow chamber lined with 4 stacked mini-servers, lights blinking in slow, steady rhythm. A laptop sat open on a crate. The screen displayed columns of financial transfers, shell companies, and encrypted manifests. Claire inhaled, sharply. Those are the files they tried to kill me for. This is the core, the entire operation. Valor stood proudly beside the discovery, panting gently, his ears shifting with pride and exhaustion. Logan knelt and rubbed a hand along the dog's neck. "Good nose," he said quietly. "Very good." Valor licked Claire's wrist, as if reminding her he was still fighting for her. Garrett clicked through the interface, eyes widening. "There are offshore accounts here, contracts, payments to private security contractors. My God, there are emails between Calder and a procurement chief at a federal subcontractor." Logan's jaw locked. "This is national, maybe higher. Reeves needs this." He unplugged one of the servers, tucked it under his arm, then grabbed the laptop. Claire reached for a second drive. But Valor froze. His ears snapped forward, his entire body turning rigid. Logan didn't need translation. He grabbed Claire, pulled her behind a stack of crates, and pressed her down. Lights flashed outside the warehouse, then the crunch of boots in snow. Garrett looked at Logan, fear breaking through his voice. "That's not a rescue team, is it?" "No." Logan peered through a crack in the collapsed siding. Silhouettes advanced through the storm, rifles raised, moving in a formation too sloppy for military, but far too disciplined for local deputies. Calder's men. Claire clutched the server to her chest. "They're sweeping the perimeter. They won't leave this place standing if they find us." Valor let out a deep, low growl, a sound full of pain but sharper instinct. Logan placed a hand on the dog's shoulder. "Easy. Not yet." The first of Calder's shooters reached the loading bay, peering inside. Logan pulled his rifle up, adjusting the angle with practiced quietness. Garrett whispered, "What do we do?" Logan steadied his breath. "We don't let them take the evidence." Valor nudged Claire again, pressing close, shielding half her body with his own despite barely being able to stand. The message was clear. If bullets came, he wanted to take them first. Claire's eyes filled with something raw, determination, rage, fear, love for the dog who refused to abandon her, not even with his lungs burning. Logan tightened his grip on the rifle as the men stepped into the warehouse, boots echoing off metal and concrete. This was no longer a blizzard. It was a battlefield. And the truth they had just uncovered was worth killing for, or dying for. Logan adjusted his stance and whispered without turning his head, "Stay behind me." The first gunman's shadow crossed the threshold. Valor's growl deepened. The fight for the core truth had begun. The first gunman stepped inside, flashlight cutting across rows of chemical vats. Logan didn't wait. He fired a controlled burst, catching the man in the shoulder before the shooter could react. The impact threw him backward into a stack of crates. The echo thundered across the warehouse, bouncing off every steel beam like a signal. Flare. The entire place erupted. Boots pounded through the drifting snow outside. Men shouted. Muzzle flashes lit the mill in stuttering bursts of white and orange. Claire ducked low behind a conveyor belt, clutching the server to her chest. Valor pressed against her thigh, trembling but ready, every breath sharp and determined. Logan dropped another shooter with a clean pivot, then motioned to Garrett. "Move left, keep low, use the pallets for cover." Garrett nodded, fear pale on his face but his body moving with instinct. Bullets snapped overhead, striking a crate labeled Wildlife Research. White powder burst into the air, sparkling like frost in the lantern glow. Claire coughed. "It's a meth precursor. If that hits a flame—" "I know," Logan cut in. But the gunfire wasn't slowing. A round ricocheted off a metal drum, pinging into the rafters. Valor barked sharply, ears pinned. "They're surrounding the perimeter," Garrett shouted from behind a stack of pallets. 3 on the north side, 2 more by the loading bay. Logan drew his second mag. "Calder's smarter than he looks. He wants us bottled up." Claire steadied her breathing, fighting dizziness. "They want the servers as much as they want us dead." Valor nudged her hand, sensing her tension, his gaze locked on the shadows shifting behind the machinery. Then, something strange. A single shot cracked through the warehouse, not aimed at them. It hit a support beam near the doorway, sending a cascade of rusted metal plates tumbling down and blocking the main entry route. Claire frowned. That trajectory came from the outside. Logan froze, analyzing the angle. Someone fired a warning shot to cut off Calder's men. But who? Before they could question it, a voice echoed faintly through the storm. "Stay down!" Claire's eyes widened. That voice was not Logan's, not Garrett's. Deputy Tom Barlow stepped into the doorway with his hands raised, rifle lowered, but ready. Snow clung to his uniform like he'd run through the blizzard full sprint. His face was pale, grief etched into the lines around his eyes. Claire whispered, shocked. "Tom?" Barlow kept his gaze on the shadows beyond the machinery. "I'm not here for Calder anymore." Logan stood tense, not lowering his weapon. "Why help us now?" "Because Calder left my brother to die in that mill 2 years ago." Barlow said quietly. Said it was an accident. Said the fire was just bad luck. But I saw the shipment logs. And I saw what he did to you tonight. Claire swallowed. "Tom, you were part of this." His jaw trembled. "I was a coward." But not anymore. Valor took a step toward him, nose twitching. He didn't growl, didn't bristle. Instead, he leaned slightly forward, sensing something different in Barlow's scent, fear, truth, and a desperate need to make things right. Barlow nodded at the dog, voice cracking. "You've got quite a partner there, Maddox." Another burst of gunfire shattered the moment. Calder's men swept in from the east side, firing wildly. Now, Logan grabbed Claire's arm, pulling her back as bullets tore through a row of solvent jugs. Logan shouted, "They're aiming for the chemicals. They want to burn the evidence." Barlow fired back, dropping one of the gunmen with a clean shot to the leg. But Calder himself appeared behind a forklift, face half-shadowed, expression twisted with fury. His voice roared through the warehouse. "You think you can turn on me, Barlow?" Barlow fired again, but Calder dove behind a container. A second later, the sheriff hurled something small and metallic across the floor. A detonator. Logan's instincts snapped. "Move!" The charge ignited instantly, flames licking up a column of stacked crates. The fire spread fast, chemical fumes bursting into violent pockets of blue and white. Claire's eyes widened. "Logan, the whole place will—" He didn't let her finish. He grabbed Claire with one arm and swept Valor into his other, hoisting the 70-pound shepherd like he weighed nothing. Garrett sprinted behind them, clutching the laptop to his chest. Barlow shouted, "Go! I'll hold them off." Calder's voice answered coldly. "No. You die with this place." A gunshot rang out. Barlow stumbled, grabbing his side. Claire screamed his name, but Logan dragged her onward, smoke filling the air as the flames raced across the chemical floor. Then a new sound cut through everything. A deep, rhythmic thump. Rotors. Logan burst through the side exit, snow exploding beneath his boots as the fire behind them blew out a window in a storm of glass and flame. Through the blizzard, a black MH-60 helicopter descended, wind shredding the snow in violent spirals. The side door slid open mid-air. Commander Reeves stood inside, gripping the frame with one hand, headset clamped tight. He shouted over the roar, "Bravo team! Lay down suppressive fire!" 2 SEALs rappelled from the chopper, rifles barking in controlled bursts. Bullets struck the ground around the warehouse entrance, pinning Calder's men behind overturned machinery. Garrett threw an arm over his head. "That's our rescue!" But Logan scanned the ridge beyond. Calder was gone, slipped into the storm like a shadow. Claire sagged against him. "He's getting away." Logan shifted Valor to adjust his weight. "Not forever. Reeves will track him, but right now, you and Valor stay alive." Reeves signaled them to move. "Get on board. This whole place is seconds from blowing sky high." Logan helped Claire toward the chopper. Valor lifted his head weakly, eyes glassy but aware. The dog never stopped tracking Claire's face, never stopped watching her. Even now, half conscious, Valor was guarding her. As they reached the helicopter, a massive explosion ripped through the mill behind them. Flames shot into the sky, debris raining across the snow. Garrett shielded his head and yelled, "They're destroying everything." Logan didn't look back. Evidence was saved. Claire was alive. Valor was breathing. But Calder had escaped, and that changed everything. Reeves grabbed Logan's vest and hauled him inside the aircraft. "You kept them alive, Hale. That's all that matters tonight." Logan finally looked down at Valor, buried against Claire's chest. The dog barely blinked, but his tail moved once. A slow, tired tap against her arm. He was still fighting. And the war just shifted into a new phase. The storm eased just long enough for Bravo team to set up a temporary command post on the ridge. The tents were low to the ground, buried halfway in snow, their camouflage netting shaking with every furious gust. Portable heaters hummed, and a satellite uplink blinked amber as encrypted files from the servers Claire'd recovered streamed into federal channels. Inside the largest tent, Logan stood over a digital map spread across a folding table. Red heat signatures tracked movement from the burned-out mill. Too many. Too disciplined. Reeves adjusted his headset, jaw tight. Calder regrouped faster than expected. Looks like he's bringing everything he's got. Logan stared at the map. He's coming for the evidence. Reeves didn't disagree. And for you humiliated him in that mill. Outside, Claire knelt beside Valor inside a makeshift medical alcove. The German shepherd's coat was stiff with blood, his breaths shallow but rhythmic. Dr. May Turner, the Navy vet specializing in canine trauma, moved with calm precision as she stitched the graze along his side. Claire stroked Valor's head, her voice barely above a whisper. "You saved me once tonight. You don't have to keep doing it." Valor blinked slowly, nudging her hand. Even half-conscious, he reassured her the only way he knew how. A distant crack broke the night. Logan's head snapped up. That wasn't ice. That was a rifle shot from the southern ridge. Reeves turned. "Everyone, positions now." Chaos snapped into motion. SEALs grabbed rifles, threw on goggles, and fanned out across the camp perimeter. The wind carried faint voices, shouting, boots crunching through snow. Then a flare streaked into the sky, bursting red overhead. Calder's opening move. Logan sprinted outside just as the first volley of gunfire tore into the camp. Bullets ripped through the camouflage netting, shredding a tent stake. Snow sprayed upward, turning into a mist of white shards under the muzzle flashes. Claire ducked behind a crate, shielding Valor's stretcher with her body. Reeves yelled through the radio, "Bravo 2, flank east. Bravo 1, anchor the south line." Logan moved without hearing the rest. He slid behind a snowbank, firing controlled bursts at 3 silhouettes advancing from the tree line. One dropped, the others dove behind rocks. Garrett crawled up beside him, breath shaking. "They're everywhere." Calder brought the rest of his men. Logan reloaded. "Good. Saves us the drive of hunting them later." The second wave came harder. Automatic fire lit the ridge as a dozen gunmen surged through the blizzard, using the wind to mask their approach. The ground shook with explosions as homemade charges detonated near the outer tripwires. Inside the medical tent, Valor strained to stand. Claire pushed him gently back. No, stay down, stay with me. Valor fought against her hand, senses sharpening, breathing ragged but purposeful. He heard the gunfire. He smelled danger. His world narrowed to one instinct. Protect. He forced himself up, legs trembling. Claire reached for his harness, desperate. Valor, stop! You can't! Another explosion hit close enough to shake the earth. Claire lost her balance, falling to her hands. Valor stumbled forward, placing himself between her and the open tent flap. Then came the moment that tore the night in half. A gunman broke through Bravo Team's line, sprinting toward the medical tent with a rifle raised. Logan pivoted, too far, too slow. The shot fired. Claire froze. Valor moved first. He lunged with everything left in his failing body, intercepting the bullet meant for Logan's back. The gunfire hit him high along the shoulder, snapping him sideways into the snow. Claire screamed, raw and feral. Valor! Logan's world went white-hot. He fired 3 rounds in rapid succession, dropping the shooter mid-stride. Reeves's voice thundered over the comms. Hold the line! They're pushing from the west! But Logan wasn't listening anymore. He sprinted toward Valor as Claire crawled to the dog's side, blood steaming in the icy air. Valor lay gasping, his body flickering between instinct and collapse. His eyes didn't close. Not once. Not while Claire touched his muzzle with shaking hands. Stay with me, she whispered. Stay. Logan knelt beside them, rage and grief burning in equal measure. From the far ridge, a familiar voice cut through the storm. Give it up, Maddox, Calder shouted. The wind carried the taunt like poison. You're outnumbered, outgunned, and your mutt's dying for nothing. Claire rose from the snow, her breath shaking, eyes glassy with fury. Logan reached for her arm. Claire. She didn't look at him. Her voice trembled. That's not a sheriff anymore. The battle shifted. SEALs tightened their formation, pushing forward with coordinated fire. Garrett and Bravo 2 flanked left, cutting down 2 of Calder's men as they attempted to circle behind. Reeves launched a flash charge that lit the storm in a blinding white cone. Calder stumbled from behind a pine, firing wildly. Claire moved with purpose, stepping out from the cover of a tent as if the wind no longer touched her. Logan called her name once, but she was already raising her pistol. Calder locked eyes with her. Finally showing some backbone, deputy. She didn't reply. Her breath steadied. Her hand leveled with absolute clarity. For Valor, she whispered. The shot cracked clean through the blizzard. Calder staggered, dropped to his knees, then collapsed face first into the snow. Gunfire faltered across the ridge as the remaining gunmen froze, stunned by the fall of their boss! Reeves shouted, Stand down! Weapons on the ground! One by one, Calder's remaining men surrendered. Silence fell, broken only by the storm's low, exhausted groan. Logan rushed back to Valor. The German shepherd lay barely breathing, chest rising in shallow, uneven pools. Claire pressed her forehead to his, her tears freezing instantly against his fur. You're not done. Not tonight. Don't you dare leave me. Valor's tail twitched once, a faint, stubborn flick. His answer. Logan touched the dog's side gently. He's still in the fight. Turner, get over here. Dr. Turner ran across the snow, medkit already open, hands steady despite the chaos. Reeves stepped beside Logan, voice low. Calder's down. Evidence is secure. The operation ends here. Logan didn't look away from Valor. Not until he knows that dog survives. Claire was silent, one hand on Valor's chest, the other gripping his paw as though she could anchor him to the world by touch alone. The blizzard raged around them, but at the center of it all, 3 lives remained bound together. 1 officer, 1 SEAL, 1 wounded shepherd refusing to let the dark have the last word. Snow still drifted across the mountains long after the last gunshot faded. The battlefield on Elk Divide looked ghostly now, footprints half buried, spent casings frozen into the crust, and the sharp smell of smoke rising from the destroyed ridge camp. Federal units had taken control of the scene, fanning out like dark silhouettes against the blinding white. Claire sat on the back ramp of the medevac helicopter, a blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The adrenaline had drained out of her, leaving a raw, trembling silence. She kept her eyes locked on Valor, who lay on a heated stretcher inside the chopper, his chest wrapped tight in blood-stained bandages. Every shallow rise of his ribs was a battle he refused to lose. A military veterinarian leaned over the dog, checking vitals. He spoke quietly to Claire. "He'll make it. It's going to be a long recovery, but he's still fighting. That's a good sign." Claire closed her eyes, exhaling a breath she'd held for hours. He always fights. On the far side of the clearing, Logan stood among federal agents as they finished debriefing him. Snow clung to his beard and uniform, but he didn't seem to feel the cold. Commander Reeves approached, jaw set in that familiar expression of stern disappointment layered over grudging respect. "You broke protocol," Reeves said. "I know," Logan replied. "You abandoned surveillance, compromised mission timing, and engaged without authorization." "I know that too." For a long moment, Reeves just stared at him, the wind whipping around them. Then he sighed. "But you saved 2 lives and exposed a pipeline none of us saw coming." His voice dropped. "That matters more than the report." Logan looked away. The night's weight pressed on his shoulders, the same kind he'd carried years ago, in Afghanistan. But something was different now. This time, he'd kept his promise. This time, he'd reached someone in time. Nearby, federal agents led survivors and informants into heated transport vans, and among them was a gaunt figure wrapped in a thick parka. Garrett Pike. His face was bruised, his wrists bandaged, but his eyes were sharp and unbroken. He spoke steadily to the agents, recounting every transaction he'd seen, every threat made, every coded route the network used. And he clutched a small evidence pouch with both hands, refusing to let go until an agent physically had him sign the release form. Garrett Pike, who had protected the laptop with his own life, was now giving a full statement under federal protection. His testimony, combined with the evidence Claire had risked everything to gather, sealed the fate of the entire smuggling network. Claire watched him quietly. He didn't have to step in. She whispered. Logan shook his head. People don't always stay the people they were. The official announcement came over the radio a few minutes later. Sheriff Roy Calder, leader of the smuggling ring, had succumbed to his injuries. The network across Wyoming, Idaho, and Utah had collapsed overnight. Arrests were already happening in 3 states. Justice, sharp and cold as the wind, finally cut through the mountains. Claire let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. "It's over," she said softly. Logan looked at Valor through the open helicopter door. "Not until he stands on his paws again." The vet gave a final nod. "We're taking him to the Military Canine Trauma Center in Cheyenne. You can ride with us, both of you." Claire stepped into the chopper without hesitation. Valor lifted one eyelid at the sound of her boots on the metal ramp. She knelt beside him, resting her forehead lightly against his. "You're going home," she whispered. The rotors spun, lifting snow into a swirling halo around them. Logan climbed aboard at the last second, gripping the overhead rail as the helicopter rose into the storm-scraped dawn. The world below them shrank into a blur of white and steel. For the first time in days, Claire allowed herself to breathe freely. And for the first time in years, Logan felt the quiet sense of something he hadn't known he was missing. Healing. He looked at Valor, patched and barely conscious, yet still refusing to let go. "You keep that up," Logan murmured. and you're going to outdo every SEAL I've ever served with. Valor's tail moved half an inch. Enough to mean, I'm not done yet. The helicopter carried them toward the horizon, toward justice, toward recovery, toward whatever future waited past the storm. 3 months later, winter loosened its iron grip on the Wyoming high country. Elk Divide thawed slowly, like a wound remembering how to heal. Snow melted into thin silver streams, running down the ridgeline where everything began. The mountains, once carved by fire and gunpowder, now breathed again. At the base of that ridge stood something new. A long wooden sign, carved from reclaimed pine, swayed gently in the spring wind. Valor Point Sanctuary for Canine Warriors and the veterans who carried them. Claire tightened the last bolt on the signpost, stepping back to admire it. Sawdust clung to her sleeves, her hair tied back in a messy knot. Her ribs had healed, her bruises had faded, but something inside her, something colder, heavier, had finally thawed too. Behind her, a playful bark shot through the air. Valor trotted across the yard, his gait steady again, despite the long scar running diagonally across his shoulder. The fur around it had grown in uneven patches, giving him the rugged look of a dog who had earned every inch of his place in this world. He carried a rope toy in his mouth, tail swaying with deliberate confidence. Logan walked beside him, carrying lumber across his shoulder. The sunlight caught the edge of his jaw, softer now than the night she first saw him through the blizzard. His usual stoic presence had eased too, like he was learning how to stand still long enough to build something instead of fight something. He nodded toward the sign. "Looks good, Maddox." Claire smiled. "It's your handwriting on the carving, and your idea for the sanctuary." Valor barked once, loudly, as if claiming ownership of everything on the property. "Yeah," Logan said. "Mostly his idea." The property stretched across 10 acres. Fenced training yards, rehab sheds converted into exercise rooms for dogs recovering from surgery, a community cabin with bunks for veterans who needed a place to land when life got too quiet or too loud. A river cut behind the trees, its water cold and clear, carrying trout like silver darts beneath the surface. But the heart of the sanctuary, its pulse, was the training yard. Valor stood in the center of it, chest lifted proudly. 4 new dogs circled him, all of them rescues. Rocco, a Belgian Malinois with a broken past. Scout, a black shepherd who flinched at sudden noises. Tango, a small retriever mix who survived an explosion overseas. And Ghost, a white husky determined to shadow Valor everywhere like a younger brother. When Valor growled low, the pack fell into line. When he moved, they followed. For a dog who had once taken bullets to save people, teaching other canines how to trust again came naturally. Claire watched him with a soft ache in her chest. When she'd collapsed beside him on the ridge 3 months ago, she thought she'd held him for the last time. Now he was the living proof of why they built this place. A truck rumbled up the gravel road. Logan set down his lumber, squinting as it rolled closer. Claire recognized the man stepping out. Deputy Tom Barlow, the man whose warning shot saved them inside the mill, the man who had turned against Calder in the end, and paid for it with a shattered career and months of federal questioning. Barlow's clothes hung loose, on him. His hands shook slightly when he closed his door. But his eyes, they were clearer than they'd been the night he stepped out of the shadows. Claire approached slowly. "Rough month?" Barlow let out a dry laugh. "Federal investigators don't have a sense of humor. Who knew?" But his smile trembled with something real, something lighter. Logan joined them. "You're here for the program." Barlow nodded. "If you'll have me." Claire exchanged a glance with Logan. Valor trotted over, sniffing Barlow's hands. Then, unexpectedly, he nudged the man's fingers, pressing his head beneath Barlow's palm as if granting permission. Barlow's breath broke. He crouched, rubbing Vala's scar gently. "Still fighting, huh?" "Always," Claire said. "That's why we named it after him." As they walked toward the community cabin, more people began arriving. A retired Marine who'd lost his best friend, a K9 named Atlas, during a deployment in Syria. A Forest Service ranger who survived a shootout last year. A young woman whose brother was killed by Calder's men, now wanting to volunteer with the dogs. Logan watched them gather on the porch, each carrying stories heavy enough to sink most people. Yet here they were, stepping into a place built from the ashes of a blizzard and a battle. He let out a slow breath. "You think this will really help them?" Claire shrugged lightly. "It helped me." Logan studied her profile. "You never told me how you felt when you woke up after the ambush." She turned toward him, terrified, grateful, angry, all of it at once. And now? She looked out at the sanctuary, at the dogs learning to trust, at the veterans learning to breathe, at Valor standing guard with a presence that felt more like a vow than instinct. "Now I feel like we built something that can outlive all the darkness we walked through." Logan nodded, his voice low. "That's what a legacy is." Valor barked sharply from the yard. Tango had wandered too close to the fence, and Valor herded him back with gentle authority. The retriever mix circled him, tail wagging nervously until Valor bumped his head against Tango's side. Teaching, guiding, protecting, a leader born from survival, not dominance. Claire wiped the edge of her eye. He deserved this life. Logan rested a hand on her shoulder. "So do you." The sun drifted lower, casting long shadows across the sanctuary, the kind of light that felt like the closing of one chapter and the quiet beginning of another. Nearby, a veteran knelt beside Ghost, letting the husky place a hesitant paw on his knee. A small moment, but a powerful one. People were healing here. Dogs were healing here. And at the center of it all, Valor stood tall, the wind tugging at the scar on his shoulder, his badge, his story, his proof that even the most broken can rise again. Logan watched him, voice quiet. "He's more than a survivor. He's the soul of this place." Claire smiled. He always was. The morning of the grand opening carried a crisp Wyoming, brightness, the kind that made the mountains look close enough to touch. The wind swept across the valley, cold but forgiving, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. Valor Point Sanctuary stood ready at last. Fresh paint, raked gravel, flags rustling along the fence line, and a crowd gathered out front, bundled in jackets, their breath fogging in the air. Local news vans parked along the gravel road, antennas raised. Reporters adjusted microphones. Camera crews tracked the K9s trotting around the yard. Every dog seemed to sense the significance of the day, tails flicking with a strange combination of excitement and dignity. Valor walked through the crowd like a veteran reviewing his troops. His scar caught the sunlight, turning the fur around it into a pale silver streak. Kids reached out to touch him, but he only slowed for the ones who approached gently. He paused beside a young boy in a wheelchair, placing his head into the child's lap. The boy's mother covered her mouth, blinking fast. Claire watched it all unfold with her clipboard tucked to her chest. She wasn't used to being this visible. But Logan had convinced her that if they wanted the sanctuary to thrive, people needed to see what they fought for. And Valor, in his steady silence, was the best ambassador she could ever imagine. Commander Reeves arrived in uniform, shaking Logan's hand with a rare smile. "Proud of you, Maddox. Not the path I expected for you, but hell, maybe the one you were made for." Logan nodded, but his eyes were on Valor. "Yeah, maybe we both had another mission in us." A reporter from Jackson Peak News approached, her camera operator already rolling. Sergeant Logan Maddox. Can we get a moment? Logan straightened, exchanging a quick glance with Claire. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "You've got this," even though she hated interviews. The reporter stepped closer. The light caught in her glasses as she asked the question everyone had been whispering about for months. "Why did you break orders to save them that night?" Logan exhaled slowly. It wasn't a sigh, more like the release of something he had carried too long. He lowered his hand to Valor, fingers brushing the shepherd's head. Because he didn't just survive the ambush. Logan's voice was steady, but gentler than anyone expected. He reminded me why we fight. His hand stayed on Valor's fur. And somehow, he saved me too. The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to hush. Valor looked up at Logan as though recognizing the truth in his words, his amber eyes bright and alert. Logan turned to the camera, shoulders squared. "What's your story with a loyal pet?" A murmur passed through the people gathered, the question landing in their chests like a quiet invitation. The camera stayed on him for several long seconds before the reporter gently ended the segment. As the crowd dispersed toward the demonstration area, a sudden shout came from the gate. A teenage girl sprinted in, breathless, clutching a leash with no dog attached. She'd driven 3 hours hoping someone here could help track her missing shepherd. Logan and Claire exchanged a look. Without a word, Logan whistled sharply. Valor's head snapped toward the girl. This was the plot twist no one expected, but everyone somehow knew was coming. Valor moved to her, sniffing the air, picking up the faint trail left on the leash. His tail stiffened, his body aligned. Instinct activated like a switch. Logan knelt beside him. "You smell him, buddy?" Valor barked once, sharp, certain. The girl's voice trembled. "Please, he's all I have." Logan rose. Claire grabbed her coat. Reeves motioned to 2 volunteers. The opening ceremony paused as if the sanctuary itself understood that this, right here, was its very purpose. Logan rubbed Valor's neck. "Lead the way." Valor bolted toward the tree line, nose low, muscles coiled, moving with the confidence of a seasoned tracker. The girl ran after him, Logan and Claire close behind. A search before the sanctuary's first hour had even begun. Reporters abandoned their scripts and followed, cameras rolling as Valor disappeared into the pines, barking once more as if telling the mountains themselves to listen. Maybe the day wasn't done testing them. Maybe some stories begin exactly when you think they've ended. Hours later, when everyone returned with the missing dog safe in the girl's arms, the sun was already dipping behind the ridge. People clapped, some cried, others simply stared at Valor as though seeing something mythic brought to life. Logan placed both hands on the shepherd's shoulders, forehead resting gently against Valor's. "Good work. Again," Claire whispered from behind him. "He was born for this place." "Not born for it," Logan said quietly. He earned it as twilight settled over the sanctuary, lights flickered on one by one. Dogs curled in warm beds, veterans gathered by the fire pit. And Valor stood on the small hill overlooking the training yard, eyes fixed on the snow-capped mountains, glowing pale under the rising moon. He stared as if the peaks held a memory or a message only he could understand. Something unfinished, something waiting. Maybe a new trail. Maybe another soul who needed saving. Maybe a story only a dog could follow. The camera crews filmed in silence as he kept his gaze locked on the horizon, the wind catching the fur along his scar. Logan joined him on the hill, hands in his pockets. Another mystery out there. Valor didn't move, but his tail lifted slightly, the way it always did when he sensed a challenge he was ready to face. Logan smiled. "All right, when the time comes, we'll see where you lead us." The shot held on dog and man, silhouetted against the Wyoming dusk. Then a final narrator's voice, your voice for the channel, rose over the closing scene. If this story touched your heart, support the German Shepherd channel. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep honoring heroes like Valor, who remind us every day what loyalty truly means. Fade Out, Chapter 10, Open Ending and Signature. Quote, the morning of the grand opening carried a crisp Wyoming brightness, the kind that made the mountains look close enough to touch. The wind swept across the valley, cold but forgiving, carrying the scent of pine and thawing earth. Valor Point Sanctuary stood ready at last. Fresh paint, raked gravel, flags rustling along the fence line, and a crowd gathered out front, bundled in jackets, their breath fogging in the air. Local news vans parked along the gravel road, antennas raised. Reporters adjusted microphones. Camera crews tracked the canines trotting around the yard. Every dog seemed to sense the significance of the day, tails flicking with a strange combination of excitement and dignity. Valor walked through the crowd like a veteran reviewing his troops. His scar caught the sunlight, turning the fur around it into a pale silver streak. Kids reached out to touch him, but he only slowed for the ones who approached gently. He paused beside a young boy in a wheelchair, placing his head into the child's lap. The boy's mother covered her mouth, blinking fast. Claire watched it all unfold with her clipboard tucked to her chest. She wasn't used to being this visible. But Logan had convinced her that if they wanted the sanctuary to thrive, people needed to see what they fought for. And Valor, in his steady silence, was the best ambassador she could ever imagine. Commander Reeves arrived in uniform, shaking Logan's hand with a rare smile. Proud of you, Maddox. Not the path I expected for you, but hell, maybe the one you were made for. Logan nodded, but his eyes were on Valor. Yeah, maybe we both had another mission in us. A reporter from Jackson Peak News approached, her camera operator already rolling. Sergeant Logan Maddox, can we get a moment? Logan straightened, exchanging a quick glance with Claire. She gave him a small nod, the kind that said, "You've got this," even though she hated interviews. The reporter stepped closer. The light caught in her glasses as she asked the question everyone had been whispering about for months. Why did you break orders to save them that night? Logan exhaled slowly. It wasn't a sigh, more like the release of something he had carried too long. He lowered his hand to Valor, fingers brushing the shepherd's head. Because he didn't just survive the ambush. Logan's voice was steady, but gentler than anyone expected. He reminded me why we fight. His hand stayed on Valor's fur, and somehow, he saved me too. The crowd quieted. Even the wind seemed to hush. Valor looked up at Logan as though recognizing the truth in his words, his amber eyes bright and alert. Logan turned to the camera, shoulders squared. What's your story with a loyal pet? A murmur passed through the people gathered, the question landing in their chests like a quiet invitation. The camera stayed on him for several long seconds before the reporter gently ended the segment. As the crowd dispersed toward the demonstration area, a sudden shout came from the gate. A teenage girl sprinted in, breathless, clutching a leash with no dog attached. She'd driven 3 hours hoping someone here could help track her missing shepherd. Logan and Claire exchanged a look. Without a word, Logan whistled sharply. Valor's head snapped toward the girl. This was the plot twist no one expected, but everyone somehow knew was coming. Valor moved to her, sniffing the air, picking up the faint trail left on the leash. His tail stiffened, his body aligned, instinct activated like a switch. Logan knelt beside him. You smell him, buddy? Valor barked once, sharp, certain. The girl's voice trembled. Please, he's all I have. Logan rose. Claire grabbed her coat. Reeves motioned to 2 volunteers. The opening ceremony paused as if the sanctuary itself understood that this, right here, was its very purpose. Logan rubbed Valor's neck. Lead the way. Valor bolted towards the tree line, nose low, muscles coiled, moving with the confidence of a seasoned tracker. The girl ran after him, Logan and Claire close behind. A search before the sanctuary's first hour had even begun. Reporters abandoned their scripts and followed, cameras rolling as Valor disappeared into the pines, barking once more as if telling the mountains themselves to listen. Maybe the day wasn't done testing them. Maybe some stories begin exactly when you think they've ended. Hours later, when everyone returned with the missing dog safe in the girl's arms, the sun was already dipping behind the ridge. People clapped, some cried, others simply stared at Valor as though seeing something mythic brought to life. Logan placed both hands on the shepherd's shoulders, forehead resting gently against Valor's. Good work. Again. Claire whispered from behind him. He was born for this place. Not born for it, Logan said quietly. He earned it. As twilight settled over the sanctuary, lights flickered on one by one. Dogs curled in warm beds, veterans gathered by the fire pit. And Valor stood on the small hill overlooking the training yard, eyes fixed on the snow-capped mountains glowing pale under the rising moon. He stared as if the peaks held a memory or a message only he could understand. Something unfinished, something waiting. Maybe a new trail, maybe another soul who needed saving, maybe a story only a dog could follow. The camera crews filmed in silence as he kept his gaze locked on the horizon, the wind catching the fur along his scar. Logan joined him on the hill, hands in his pockets. Another mystery out there. Valor didn't move, but his tail lifted slightly, the way it always did when he sensed a challenge he was ready to face. Logan smiled. All right, when the time comes, we'll see where you lead us. The shot held on dog and man, silhouetted against the Wyoming dusk. Then a final narrator's voice, your voice for the channel, rose over the closing scene. If this story touched your heart, support the German Shepherd channel. Like, share, and subscribe so we can keep honoring heroes like Valor, who remind us every day what loyalty truly means. Fade out.